Thank you all for coming tonight to the Cerulean Arts Collective Tour and Talk for January, February, and it features exhibitions by Dan Crowley, Kathleen McSherry, Joellyn Ross, Gus Sermas, and Mark Willie. So the exhibition is up through February 12th. You can come down and see it in person. You can also see everything on our website. So I'll put a link in the chat for you as we go. And I should also mention we're recording the talk, so we'll edit and post it on our YouTube channel so you can see it later or send it to anybody who might have missed it. So I'm going to spotlight Tina's video. So what we're going to do is go through the gallery and visit each artist's space one by one and hear what they have to say. So the first artist we're going to visit is Mark Willie. Hello, Mark.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this talk. I wanted to initially thank Tina and Mike for doing such a great job, and well, with their gallery in general. I think it's a wonderful gallery space. They do an amazing job, and they were really wonderful in kind of helping me curate this show, and their arrangement, I think, was really something I probably wouldn't have been able to do as well as they did. I think they were really understood the work and understood how it worked in the gallery space. So I really appreciate that that care. And I'm really happy. I'm a first time. This is the first time I've shown with Cerulean Gallery. I'm a new member, so it's very exciting for me to be in this show, my sort of inaugural show here at Cerulean. So, and then also thank you everyone for my fellow artists and friends and colleagues that are here tonight to hear us talk about our work. A little background on myself. I studied painting and printmaking in undergraduate school in Boston, the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And then I, in a sort of circuitous route, found myself in the profession of graphic design. So I've been working professionally in graphic design for a very long time, in both my capacity as a partner in a design studio in Philadelphia that I've had for about 25 years, a fairly successful graphic design partnership. And then I've been equally teaching graphic design, both as an adjunct faculty and then as full-time faculty at Drexel University. And that's been about 25 years as well. So there was a crossover between those two careers. And so I say that because I think a lot of what I do in both my work as a graphic designer professionally, but also my work as a teacher, informs the work I do in I guess my fine art work that we're presenting here. And I think there's kind of a conversation between what I do and that sort of methodology and design, and with the work that I do with my painting. So. And I came back into painting and printmaking a little later in my career. So I've been painting and working in collage for a very long time, but I've kind of been concentrating it more in earnest in the last probably 5 years of sort of seriously approaching the work. So I've had this sort of balance between plein air painting and collages, because you're looking at a collage right now. Mostly in this show, they're all based on sort of the form of landscape, right? So the plein air paintings are direct, as they are, as the term means, that they're paintings that I do out on site. They're entirely landscapes. In this show, they're from various parts of mostly in South Jersey, sort of the marshlands along the Delaware Bay, some at the Jersey Shore. In this case, this is actually from Avalon. And then a couple from England, where I spend a lot of part of my summer in a study abroad program with my students at Drexel. I also have been bringing my oil paints along. So the plein air paintings are oil on paper, and then in this case in the show they're mounted on board. And so these paintings are specific to a site. They sort of reflect everything that goes into sort of plein air painting. They're fairly done quickly. They're done in not always the most pleasant environment. The weather is certainly a part of that experience. And I think that's the important part, is it's really that experience. What I really love about plein air painting is sort of, there's sort of a fairly quick response to what you're looking at, sort of dependent on the conditions. And there's sort of this immediacy to them, at least the way I approach the paintings. They're done, as I said, fairly quickly. And I'll do a number of them per session, so I'll be out for a couple hours. I might do 2 or 3 hours. I might do 2 or 3 or 4 sort of quick plein air paintings. And that's where I leave them. They're sort of done on site. The only thing I do later is, get them ready for mounting and presenting. So those are, I think, inform my collage work, which are vaguely landscapes. They're sort of kind of invented landscapes. They're definitely from my memory of a landscape or what's that sort of form, but they're used. So I used cut or torn paper, found paper. A lot of the work is I start with I'll paint on I have piles of paper that I might paint on, just like flat colors or sort of modeled colors, and I sort of do these layers of collage, and then I mark into them. I work into them with the pencil and crayon, and then more paint and more surface materials. I've been starting to actually do a little bit of other objects, like some window screens and things, and bringing that into the collage. But these are really about the response to the landscape form, but also process. So this particular, for example, this painting or this collage is a lot of layers. So I sort of start with it's a little bit of a call and response as I proceed with the work. Was I'll lay something down, I'll lay something against it. I might have a sort of an idea of what I want to do with what I have at hand, and then they sort of build, and I scratch into it, and I peel things off and glue more things onto them. So it's a real kind of a process that I go through, and I do a lot of these, and so I spend a lot of time editing things down. That I rip them up, reconfigure them. So these are very sort of thickly layered sort of glued paper and markings and things like that. And I like this sort of immersion for myself in the materials, in the composition, and what sort of evolving out of that sort of process of creating that form. And I think that also then goes back to my plein air painting. And when I do them, obviously it's a different medium, working in it's just paint, but I also kind of look at the landscape and break it down in different sort of layers, and try to not recreate the ideas that I'm working with in the collage, but keep the experience fairly loose. And so once I kind of develop whatever I'm painting, it becomes more about the painting itself, and the markings, and the composition, and the color, and sort of the surface, etc. of the work. So they're not absolutely true to the landscape. They're sort of responses to the landscape. And again, I think what I love about this is the immediacy of them. And then I try to bring that sort of immediacy into the collage work. I think there's kind of a conversation going on between them. I think, again, Tina and Mike did a really nice job of sort of seeing that when they arranged the work in the gallery. I also think it's a conversation that that idea of process, and bringing sort of my experience as a designer into the process of painting, because design is a lot of process, a lot of juxtaposition, a lot of sequencing. And so that kind of finds its way into maybe the individual work, but also the groupings of work. So I like to see things. I think my work works best in sequence and in series. So I like to kind of think of projects that I work on in that context. I'm currently doing some work that are based on some printmaking that I've done, which are additions, and then I go in and collage and paint and work into them, and they become a different kind of series that goes sort of beyond the printmaking. So I think the work that I do as a graphic designer and the methodology of graphic design informs the work that I do, particularly the collages, but I think in some sense the landscape paintings as well. And this painting, this has some little bits of screen, a lot of markings. There's a photograph in it, and the photograph is just an old photograph that's sort of a piece of it that kind of doesn't really mean anything, but it feels like it's wants to be in the landscape. And then the little pieces of type that I have just maybe I found in the studio that come from some other project, and they're kind of layered and worked into, and it becomes kind of this landscape or this landscape form. Obviously they're fairly abstract, but you can see the sort of grid that's created in the way the composition is done. And I like this sort of working with both sort of found stuff. I also will go back and look at failed paintings and cut them apart and reconfigure them and rethink them. So a lot of these collages have some bits of old watercolors or a piece of oil paintings that I think were not successful. The plein air work I do a lot of on site. So I have a lot to. I guess a success rate, if you wanted to put it in those terms, is, for example, I did about 80 sort of small plein air paintings in London when I was there this past summer. That sounds like an incredible amount. They were sort of quick plein air paintings, but 2 or 3 maybe are like worth like showing anyone. So I think, but the whole process of doing that and the sort of iterations of the subject. And that brings me around a little bit to the subject matter there. It's pretty, the subjects of South Jersey. My wife and I have a second home in South Jersey on the sort of along the Delaware Bay, near the Delaware Bay, and sort of the marshland. And it's flat landscape. It's a lot of sky, a lot of straight lines, a lot of marshy plants. To me, it's really beautiful, and the sky and the land meeting are really beautiful. But it's a fairly open and almost sort of I don't want to say blank canvas, but I can really work into that sort of format and that sort of grid of the landscape with markings and color. And to say again, back to that sort of idea of design, where I'm going and kind of figuring out what the grid of that particular scene might be. And that sort of translates into the couple paintings I have from the Jersey shoreline in Avalon. It's just the dunes, and it's it's kind of an exciting abstraction to work from, finding patterns in the landscape, and how does that translate into the final painting. So I think also working in a square format is also, and not all of these obviously are in square format, but some of them I was doing a lot of stuff, particularly the ones like these that I did in England, in squares, mostly because they were easy to transport around when I would take the train out to various sites and walk to various places. But also it's a very designy kind of format, the square. The square breaks down modularly into other squares, and so it becomes a sort of interesting sort of compositional format to work from. So I think if anything from my work, and what I'm really happy about this exhibit and the arrangement that Mike and Tina did in the space, was this kind of conversation between these between the media, but also between the sort of immediacy of being in a space and in a place and painting, and then the sort of immediacy of kind of it happening in the studio on a table with piles of material that I kind of put next to each other and sort of make something out of. And I find that process is really important to me and really interesting and exciting, and also the idea of things working in sort of this idea of sequencing, and I would like to, as I move on to more recent work, I'm thinking more about work in sequence, in series, and you know, in a little bit of, in this sort of very abstract way, kind of storytelling from one image to the next. So I think that is, I don't know if I answer questions now or answer some questions later. Again, I'm really excited about being in this, being able to show my work and to talk about it as well. So
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, we field questions as they come in. So if anybody has questions throughout, just put them in the chat and I'll lob them to the artists. But it's a beautiful show. So
thank you.
We're happy to have it, and you. So next we'll move on to Dan Crowley. Hello, Dan.
Hello. All right. It's my work here. It's sort of kind of like an escape to fantasy land. I've been doing sort of like fantasy landscapes for the past few years, adding it into, well, when we go around to the other side, you'll start seeing like animation type characters that I'm throwing into these little goofy worlds. With these paintings here, I'm just more or less just flowers added into my head. Obviously, you know, you have these bright white flowers and it's nighttime. So would that be real? No. But it's sort of like a pattern I'm creating over the space of the canvas. And I'm doing that over here as well with these flowers. Got like a bright clouds from there. This is almost like a black hole in the background and these crazy floating flower things. So I'm sort of trying to get away from you know, reality, but kind of use things as I see fit. As far as adding any colors, I sort of like a combination of colors as I, you know, to kind of enhance it. Now the fantasy stuff, pretty much since college, I've always enjoyed animation movies, watching the backgrounds of how they make it, the characters, and sort of like stylizations of these things. So in here, there's going to be a lot of water pixies, which is really just female figures, but I added like little wings to them, simplified the forms, and then I throw them into one of my fantasy landscapes where the moons that don't necessarily make sense. They have clouds inside the moons, where there a lot of times I'll have multiple moons. The hair color, you know, go crazy blue. A lot of times I'll outline some of the characters. It's more or less like the thought process is sort of like backlight, but it's sort of allowing me to draw on the painting with the brush. And then the flowers themselves, they're giving me like a space, you know, like little blocked out areas that kind of travel through the canvas. So I'm sort of designing in that sense. These smaller pieces, they're sort of extractions from my larger paintings. I've been painting large pretty much from day one. It just feels more comfortable to me. So for me going smaller, it's been a little bit difficult, but slowly been getting there. Just keep at it, maybe work on 5 to 10 paintings at a time, depending on the drying times and whatnot. They're mostly oil paintings. Sometimes I will start out with acrylic but I almost always go to oil. I like the material better, especially on canvas. Now recently I've been doing some acrylics, but it's on wood And the reason being is I have acrylic markers I get to draw on top of the paintings. But with these here, this is kind of like a water pixie series. One of my sketchbooks, I did this, I created a water pixie, which is just like a female figure and with wings and whatnot. And, you could look at all the little fantasy movies like Labyrinth, they have these Muppet characters and they, throw little wings on them. The type of things I really do enjoy. And I'm trying to pull that into some of the paintings, like kind of create these worlds. Some of like the fish, they're flying in the air. Why not? It's just a painting. I have the moons, I'm animating their faces, actually putting faces on it. You can go back to some film history where, the moon gets shot in the head. I think it was a German black and white movie that was really old. With the smaller ones, I do think I'm allowed to sort of get to build up more textures in them. Whereas the larger ones, they're so large, you'll see a little bit of texture, but it's not the main focus. Whereas the smaller ones, what I am finding is I'm actually to get more layers into them, more textures. With this one, you'll see me scratching I use like a steak knife, and that kind of allows certain colors to come through. So we do have, there are like sort of color chords going on, where this yellow is working with the red and maybe a little orange there. And then there's another area where it's like a blue-green mixing with more of a violet blue. But usually these characters, along with these fish, there might be a circle, but it's kind of trying to draw your eye around the canvas with it. And I am, this particular show, I am relating more of these paintings together. They were sort of done as a series. This one, yeah, it's another water pixie. Got the yellows and the oranges, and then background, multiple suns, multiple stars. You'll see with this one, I have a sun and at the top and a waterfall, and then there's sky below it. Actually, it's like, why not? Just a painting, do whatever you feel like. But it is sort of like a nod to some of the animation. The one square one there has almost like a Dr. Seuss type face to it. And then like I took a lot of drawing classes, but it was always, for some reason, it was always female figures. So that's sort of where that went. Now this is a painting I started beginning probably before last year's show. And I finished up in summer this past year. I call it Playmations, and I did do all three of them at the same time. Pretty much, I think it's like 8 feet tall by 5 feet. And this is where I sort of have like a maximalist approach. So there's multiple characters on top of each other, almost collaging the landscapes. I'll have a seascape at the bottom, then there, a middle section where there's ground again. There's a sky in the background, multiple stars, multiple suns. Now there's video game characters in this one, from Donkey Kong, Space Invaders. I think there's a Q*bert in there somewhere. And it's sort of coming from animation, video games, all the sort of fun things you do, like if you're at an amusement park. With these large paintings, I'm really trying to immerse, sort of like when you go on to like a Disney ride or something, like It's a Small World or something, you're sort of just being surrounded by it. And that's sort of my goal with this. Now, the framing, I didn't frame these. I actually like used a roller, rolled it across and then painted it in, but I used a color that kind of ties all of them together. And with it, I have grommets I'm using to hang instead of, stretching it. One of the reasons is they're so large, that's a real hassle, whether to ship it or even just moving it from one place to another. I always had to rent a van, where now I could just roll them up. But what I'm finding is because I'm painting a border around it, now I'm starting to buy little print stamps, things to kind of, dazzle up the framing part of it to give it a more finished look. But I do kind of like it raw the way it is, just kind of thrown up there like a piece of meat or something. But yeah, here you'll see you have a Ferris wheel, slide, almost like the little fun things you would do, you know, when take kids to the amusement park or something. You know, got little cartoon type characters, you know, playing some sort of ball, you know, football, baseball, whatever. Have a little nod to Doctor Who there. There's a Dalek, which are supposedly the bad machine guys in that series. The mushrooms here, it sort of goes with my fantasy landscape. It just happens to have a certain shape where it seems like I can block out certain areas and kind of work a little color pattern with it. In this case, it was like blues, but in other ones, there could be oranges and reds. I've got the TARDIS, we've got that Jack Skellington in there, and which are, you know, certain things I've enjoyed on television, whatnot. Sort of thrown a little nod to it. You know, we've got a Santa Claus up in the top there. Like holidays, obviously. My neighborhood, we have a bunch of kids in the neighborhood, so they really do it up as far as the holiday decorations with the lights and all that. But it's sort of just kind of drawing from that, and placing it in there and trying to see if I can make it work. And, you know, I guess, you know, the immersion experience, so it is what I'm trying for. Now, these large pieces, usually it's about 15 hours for each large piece. So this is definitely 45, you know, this might have been 45 to 60 hours painting going on. And you know, I always worked in an industrial setting pretty much my whole career. So this has been a side thing. I usually manage to get anywhere from 5 to 15 hours a week painting. But what's fun here is I pretty much start off with a crayon, start drawing. Usually I get to a certain point and I just want to paint. So start painting, then I'll come back, I might draw over on top again. But you know, the color patterns with me, I've always stuck to the color wheel. You know, it's strange, like for me to use browns like this is actually kind of, it's not, you know, characteristic of me. I mean, I pretty much take paint out of a tube and it looks great to me. But it is definitely a combination of the colors working together that gives it, you know, that makes the colors really work together, you know, make them rich. With this piece, I actually did glue on some fabric, and that's been something I've been starting to do with the other paintings, where I'm kind of collaging that in, or I'm using it for a border on some of the other pieces I have behind me. Now this is my largest painting. I have a couple of them that are this size, but they're just by themselves. Obviously, it takes up a lot of room, and if I stretch them all, like, you know, traditionally, I don't think I'd have any room in my basement. So, but you know, it's sort of an enjoyment piece for me. Hopefully, other people enjoy them as well. Over here, I have sort of the fantasy little landscapes again, mixed in with my water pixies. The fish, I don't know, for some reason I was thinking, I had this fish idea going in my head where it kind of sort of Dr. Seuss them, instead of making the, obviously, you know, realism is just sort of, it's something I use, like, all right, that looks good, but then I sort of want to do my own drawing and animate it and do whatever, you know, I feel like. And so I keep it simple, like that, you know, just little swirly fins type things, simple type drawing, but it does kind of take up like a shape of the canvas, and then I can work on it. So here you've got multiple yellows, you know, a yellow that's lighter on top of another yellow that's actually over sort of something leans towards an orange, and then your lake and your clouds are orange, so they're kind of working together. This one is one I actually worked on this quite a bit. I kept building up the layers a little bit. I was using liquid. It's a little faster drying, but it was allowing me to add more red on top of it, kind of, you know, as far as the body of the pixie as well as the fish. And that one, kind of think of it as a cute one. I think I called it Kiss. And then the background sky, just yellow dominant to work with it. Some of these are they're fantasy stuff, but it's a nod to Clive Barker, the guy that did Hellraiser. He has a book series called The Aberrat, and I think it's meant for young teens. But what he did was he actually did paintings before he wrote the story, and he's got to have like 150 to 300 paintings, and he paints very large. But he started painting the characters, and then he started going into landscapes. So I used some of his ideas, and basically it was based around a little sea that's in this alternate world of our own. And the paintings, he had like pyramids in the sea. He had an island that was based in the shape of a head. So I kind of stole some ideas from him and threw them in. And then I worked my own thing in with it. You know, I got there like the Wizard of Oz kind of green castle in the background, and my Doctor Who stuff, and water pixies, and, you know, the little simplified boats. On the one to the right, got a little pirate ship back there. Started playing with the sky a little bit, the clouds where it's kind of circular, and then the clear skies in the background, you know, the darker with the stars dotted through, but it's like creating this circular pattern. You know, a sun, so it's part daytime and as well as night. I do that in quite a few of them where I do both. This is a stylized pattern of the sun, and I have a second sun up there. Why not? But yeah, the lower section, it's warmer colors, and then it's cooler in the other area. This one here, you'll see again, I have a couple moons, almost like a daytime cloud, and then it's nighttime. I've got the circular pattern rolling through it. But the dominant thing is the water pixies running through the center, you know, with these little, almost like a fish shape type thing to their bodies. On the lower right, I've got like a Saturn floating in the lake or ocean, whichever you would like. And then I added like a keyboard ribbon that I pasted to it. This one here, I also used a roller to kind of create a border where I allowed some of the color to kind of bleed through. So I used a lot of liquid on it, so what was below it would still kind of come through a little bit. But it would give it a border, and it was almost like a framed look to it. The colors are, you know, they're ambiguous in a lot of ways in this one. But the keyboard, it's sort of like symbolic, because I do think colors, they do act like musical notes or, you know, color chords that, you know, if they work together in certain ways, you know, there is that kind of relation there. So that popped out there. This one over here, I did during pandemic. Now I worked through the pandemic, a lot of people didn't, but obviously when I wasn't working, everything was closed. So I actually had about 5 paintings this size that were done together. Now, and this is 2020. So I was really kind of starting up with the fantasy landscapes with this one, but I allowed a lot of the textures to start building up. I think it's 30 by 40 inches. I named it after an NXS song, Elegantly Wasted. But I sort of have an Art Nouveau kind of line thing going through the whole painting that's going vertical like a plant, just kind of, you know, curling around and doing some things there. The color pattern, you know, it is mostly yellows, but I've got like a light blue. With this one, I kind of let the drips happen. And, you know, just to give it some separate kind of element that, you know, has I guess I would say a more mature but enjoyable look to it. It's a seascape. The brushwork, especially around the sun, is definitely like Van Gogh thinking, as far as, you know, a brighter yellow on top of another yellow, and allowing the paintbrush to like leave the texture. Don't try to blend it in. You know, I have multiple suns, moons, stylized, and then, you know, the flower base. But this one, it was an enjoyable piece. And like I said, this is without all the characters like I get in the other paintings. But I've been painting for 30 years. It's more or less something I've done on the side. And for the last 10 years, they've been kind of relating. Before that, it almost seemed like every 2 years, it would have looked like a different artist was painting. It just seems like the last 10 years, I've been a little more focused on what I want out of a painting. Now, this is only my second year with Cerulean. That's about it as far as, you know, my work goes. I do have an art degree from Westchester University. I graduated in 1994, so it's been a while. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
And next we come to Kathleeen McSherry.
Yeah, I am a found object sculptor. I started doing that about 20 years ago. And I was fascinated. At the time, I was diagnosed with MS, and I used to draw and paint, and my hands were a bit shaky, and I didn't draw anymore. But putting pieces together with other pieces seemed like a better fit for me. I was more in control of the objects. And with this piece here is, I forget what I named it, reel to reel or director's cut. And that is a bunch of reels together kind of as a wall piece. I usually like multiples of things in different sizes and putting them all together. And in some cases, I not only put, well, like this piece coming up, this is called, actually somebody renamed it who came to the opening and called it the creative mind. And on one side, it's a bunch of gears and noses and ear clips and all of this. There's a whole lot of activity on one side, and the other side is kind of at rest. And then I put this top piece on the head, and it looked a lot like an antenna. So I added some leaves to it, some birds to it. And it kind of, with a lot of my pieces, I do a lot of staring at the objects and thinking about them, and I let them tell their story, and I kind of follow what they're trying to say. And I find that works really, really well. I really pay attention to the objects and what I'm trying to do. And more often than not, they kind of call to me and tell me what they want to become. This one on the far left is called, this one is called
Strap Hanger Wars.
Strap Hanger Wars, and I use an actual strap hanger from the red subway. It was called the Redbird trains, and they were putting up strap hangers, and they were selling it. So I went online and I got that, and I had a bunch of hands from different mannequins, and it seemed to put itself together in the chaos of gripping for a hand and to hold on to the ride, if you will. And I was very happy with that piece. If you pull back, the next one is called Second Amendment. this was a nod, and around the middle arm is bullet casings. So it's like someone is shot around it. And the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. So this is a literal translation of the right to bear arms, and it's 5 bear arms. So that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek one, but it worked pretty well. Yeah, I was happy with that. That was a heavy piece, but it worked pretty well. This one is a World War I toy, and it's lost its head and its arms and part of a leg, and it's surrounded by bullet casings. So there's loose bullet casings all around, and this is this would be, I just lost my train of thought here, hang with me. This is the spoils of war, and it's really the unhappy, especially World War I, which was a brutal, brutal war for all the soldiers involved. This shows, this is the spoils of war. This is what they get. They get not only, it's a doll's toy from World War I, but it's only in pieces. And that's how a lot of soldiers came back from the war, in pieces, either in pieces with their mind getting the, what do they call it, the shell shocked, and it tore apart the family. That is a typical family at the time, at the turn of the century. And it's a poignant piece for me. It is sad, and it is sad and tragic, and that's what war is. This piece, I have 2 pieces that are clock cases, which I've filled on either side of the piece in the center. This is a Japanese word for spinning. Megi, whatever, but it's the Japanese word for spinning, and there are lots of spinning tops within this piece, and she's gently holding a pig, and she seems to be in control of that as well as a top, and there's a kind of a top face leaning gently, a Japanese face, and an old pen touching the tip of the old top. So I let that piece tell me what it wanted to make it. I searched my studio around for pieces that seemed to work together. I do that at some times, and these pieces together kind of dictate what they want to become. And that worked on this first clock case piece. This second one is called Alma Marie Rose. And this was a sweater stretcher that my mother had for years. And that's the wooden body and the 2 arms. And then I just saw an energy that really kind of forcefully dictated what it wanted to be. And I added, these are clock chimes that I made curls around her hair. And she had her arms straight up, and she's holding a bow in her hand, like she's just raised her arm up and she's just finishing a note on the violin. And I have a violin on her side and a car part as the body, and an audio tape to surround her torso. I noticed that the audio tape reel was yet another subliminal piece that she wanted her story told. She was, I looked up on the internet and I found that this Alma Marie Rosé, her name was a famous violinist during World War II. And she wound up, she was a noted violinist, and she played beautiful music, and she was committed to her music. I mean, that was the most important thing with her. And she wound up in Auschwitz during the Second World War, and she was made not the choreographer, she was made the composer of a orchestra that she was the leader and composer of this orchestra playing for the Nazis. She was just she didn't care as long as she could play her music, and she played beautiful music. So she took on the job as the orchestra leader of this orchestra, and she insisted that the other musicians work about 17 hours a day on the music to make it perfect. And needless to say that the other prisoners really did not like her for it. And little did they know that she prolonged their lives in Auschwitz. So they didn't directly go into the gas. And then she also made an enemy out of one of the guards in Auschwitz. She was a woman guard who really hated the fact that the other Nazi men in the camp were smitten with her, and they were mesmerized by her talent, and she didn't make a friend out of her either. Now, it comes to a sad end because it was getting very close to the end of World War II. And there are two stories about her. One is that she was poisoned, and that she was poisoned. They didn't know if it was another prisoner at Auschwitz or that woman who made no mistake that she detested her. Then there's another version, is that she died of botulism just before the war. Either way, it's a tragic end to a really brilliant, talented violinist. And her spirit kind of took over on this particular piece. And it haunts me, I will say. And and this other clock case is a bit of, I grew up in a Catholic neighborhood, although I wasn't a Catholic, and this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek, having these clowns on either side of the confirmation girl in the middle, and it's all overshadowed by a nun. The two clown faces, and the nun is also holding a little nun, and on top of a loaf of Wonder Bread, getting a little. I don't believe that art necessarily has to be deadly serious like the other one, although things come out, and sometimes it's just a tongue-in-cheek, a bit of whimsy takes over. Adding the Wonder Bread to the top of that clock case was kind of reminiscent of a Woody Allen movie where he converts to Catholicism and pulls out of a brown paper bag a loaf of Wonder Bread and a crucifix and some other things that are real sight gags. So, and that's what I always thought of with Catholicism. It's all Wonder Bread, and I take a very, I guess it's a not so religious view of things and a serious view. And the whole fact that I found somebody was playing with a doll that was a nun, I found comical. The next piece is got a quote from Sinclair Lewis, and it says, "When fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross." And I found this piece, giant peanut, and it was all flesh color. And I painted the lips on it. I painted the teeth on it. I put an American flag on it and doll arms, and had it holding a cross. And the quote has haunted me for years, the Sinclair Lewis, and certainly for the times we live in, I found it a really powerful piece. So Sinclair Lewis seems to be right on the mark for this one. And this is another political piece. I don't normally do political pieces, but I'm stretching my found objects. These are masks. One is staring straight ahead and kind of ignoring the other two. And then the next one is Pinocchio, and has an American flag dribbling out of his mouth. And the last mask is they're kind of looking on and reacting to the Pinocchio, and actually it's a political liar, and that's been haunting me over the past 2-3 years of how much we as a country have really condoned lying. When I was a young girl, the worst thing you could be was be called a liar, and now it's just a reality. Everybody lies, and everybody is taking that lightly, and I don't. I think it's a terrible thing to lie so freely as Americans do. Is gonna bite us in the butt, and we will suffer the reaction to that. This piece is a more of a fantasy piece. It's kind of a Tibetan model, and it has a bunch of apples and maracas around it, and it's got a third eye in the forehead of this Tibetan model, and it's got eyes as breasts, and it's just a it's a lot of symbolism of a lot of eyes viewing, I believe, viewing the world, and it kind of speaks for itself. And the more you look at it, the more symbolism you'll find in it. And that's what I like to do with a lot of pieces, is call on the viewer to stop and look and really view. The more you look, the more you will see in this piece. So I think that's it. I have some other work on the other side of the wall, but
Yeah, we're heading around the corner now.
there I am. We're going around the corner. Here's another clock piece. I use a lot of clocks, clock cases as kind of a canvas to work within, and this is has another Tibetan feel, and it's got the third eye, the knowing eye. And it's got some symbols in it. It's a hand holding a piece of fruit in the place that it would be the metronome of the clock. And it's made out of, again, a mask that fit on. And I use a lot of timepieces and clock pieces in my work. And she has a clock face, almost as a comb in her hair, or his hair. I'm not sure he has a sex one way or the other. It's just a being. Moving on to the next one, as I said, I have used a lot of symbolism of clocks and timepieces, and this one is a reflection of that, using some clock parts from various old clocks, clock faces, and measuring rulers to measure things, but in this case, it measures time. And it has a lot of rulers and clock faces, and it just invites the eye to linger over it. And the viewer can put themselves, as they're looking at it, they can come up with their own rationale for this piece. I like to include the viewer in the anticipation of participation in the piece. And it's called Time Out, or
Timeline.
Timeline, yes, Timeline. And I used some dolls that I had repainted and wrapped wrapped around their legs, causing them to stay stationary. This is a pull chain. These are pull chains that are for a light. And I've added clock faces and a violin piece to it. And I added some gears and things into the sheep that's in the corner, and some children, the baby doll, Cupid dolls, and had some, this was just a piece I just found it called to me, and these pieces wanted to be in this piece. So I have a style of working that it takes me a while. Very few pieces I work on, I know from the beginning what it's going to be. Others, I work as I go, and I walk around my studio and I see pieces that call to me. And these are pieces that are subliminal, and they need to be in those pieces. I can't give a much rational. If you'll notice, the canvas that I used is an artist paint box, and I opened that up and so that another tale to tell would be all these pieces, like the colors of a paint box, all work together to compose a painting. All these creatures and people form together to form a piece of artwork. So it has the same the clockworks and the clock faces on it, and holding on to the timelines. They all work together to form a piece of art.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay, sure.
It's a wonderful exhibition.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to visit the exhibition of Gus Sermas. Unfortunately, Gus can't be with us tonight, so I'm going to read his statement, and then Dan Crowley will actually say a few words, because he's good friends with Gus and a former student from Westchester. So Gus writes, as a Greek American born near Sparta, classical Greek mythology has always fascinated me. Throughout my career, I have relied on those iconic stories to engage the issues that face contemporary society and us as individuals. The story of Persephone, for example, deals broadly with themes of death and renewal, but it can also be seen as an environmental fable that illustrates the fragility of the natural order. These myths, which I learned from early childhood, inspire my art, but I don't literally illustrate them. Instead, they have a general influence on the choices I make in color, shape, and composition. And although I don't render the visual appearance of things, my work often evokes a dialogue between the man-made and organic natural form. My mode of working is largely improvisational. I often start with a thematic idea, and with that in mind, establish a simple formal outline. But from there, I make numerous additions with many major and minor adjustments. I reserve the right to change any aspect of the painting at any time. It's important to me that while I work toward refinement, I preserve the visual evidence of spontaneity. Painting for me is the accumulation of small but critical gestures that add up to an embodiment of my thoughts, values, prejudices, and preferences. In short, it is the self-made visible. Paintings are multi-leveled artifacts, vessels of meaning that fuse. Paintings are multi-leveled artifacts, vessels of meaning that fuse form, subject, and content. So that's Gus's statement. Dan?
Okay. So Gus, yeah, he was my painting teacher as well as my drawing teacher. He was a professor at Westchester University. I think he may have retired maybe 10 years ago. Not sure exactly. I graduated in 1994. Yeah, I guess I met him in 1992. He thinks of himself as an expressionist. Like I said, he doesn't necessarily do realism, but you will find some certain elements in his paintings that are drawn from, what he would say, like ancient Greece, his heritage, his background. So I'll often see like a column, like a Doric or Ionic column, maybe with some of the local like floral mixed in with it. He tends to use what I said, like I said, this is me observing his paintings, and I've been looking at them for 30 years now. But he does use like framing inside of his paintings, and then he'll tend to work the colors. He's like, to him, colors like, I don't know if he would even call it spiritual, but there is some sort of pattern where he's trying to draw something out. He does love the abstract paintings, more gestural. There are broad areas of color. With this painting, you can see there's a design element. Even in his drawing classes, he would always discuss like drawing for the composition, for the size of the page. And then he would go back and kind of rework some of his own stuff. He would paint on top of his drawings, and even his brushwork with some of his larger paintings, he's drawing with the brush, designing for the whole composition. With the larger paintings, it really is color oriented. So in here, you can almost see like there's two rectangles. It's broken up into two, a top and a bottom. The lines almost take on like a painterly quality in that they're lines, but it's also like a big brush stroke. He likes to use areas of color. In this one, they're more simplified. It's not like it's color on top of another. It's just competing with the other areas. And the whole concept is for it seems to be balancing itself against it. Now, most of the paintings in this show are titled with the Trojan War. So I think it's the whole concept there is to try to create a tension inside the paintings that kind of work themselves out to allow his personality and whatnot to come through. Yeah, you'll see multiple pieces. This almost looks like a fabric in the middle, but you do see a diagonal pattern repeating itself, and then you have the vertical pattern. Overall, it's square. Now, yeah, it looks like he's using some sort of like crayon on top of, like this would be something he would do in a drawing class. But he is going back, painting into it, drawing over the painting. I'm sure it's titled something with his heritage. He was, like he said, he was Greek, born there. I think he was grew up in Texas, but he does use that mythology, the Hellenistic, ancient Greece, classical. For me, he taught me. I had like 5 painting courses where his approach was always to let you sort of do your own thing, try to figure out what you wanted to do, and kind of let you go with it. Well, he does that himself. This is sort of what where he came from. I do think he has a New York influence with especially his larger paintings. But you'll see some of the same design elements through his paintings. As far as balance composition, large areas of color, kind of working on top of each other. Now, the larger paintings, he tends to build up a lot of paint texture. Now, where these pieces here, they're a little bit of a collage thing. He probably has some acrylic mixed in, maybe some printmaking, and then he's going in, drawing over top of it, painting on top of it. Here, he's actually tearing pieces and then putting back together. You can see the like sort of columns in the background where they're kind of twisted, turned. Hence the Trojan War, like a tension thing. Whereas his Persephone series is more like rebirths. You might see female figure. I think she used to be released from Hades for a few months during the spring, and then she'd be recaptured going back. Now this,
Dan, would you say Gus had a big influence on you?
Oh yeah, Matt, I almost had to get away from looking at his work when I was younger. Yeah, because I saw his big, large pieces. First off, he takes all the students and puts them to work doing yard work or whatever. Yeah, he definitely had an influence, especially with these like flower shapes. He always seems to. It seems to me it's sort of like a shape thing more for the floral, and then you'll see like an architectural shape. Like in some of his paintings, he'll use arches. He'll use a framing, and sometimes with the framing, like a border type thing, where he goes from one color to the other. This is obviously a still life with printmaking patterns throughout, but then it looks like he might have some torn pieces, and it's working within the the natural frame that he put into the painting. He breaks that. He'll break over into it. Yeah, he was one of the definitely big influence, because I did see some of his work when I was a student there, and it's very big, bright colors, bold, where this is a little more subdued, little more, it's got some mid-tone, almost black and white in some parts, but then coming back. So a lot of this looks more like a drawing exercise and a collage exercise. Here again, you have the two, he sort of shaped the whole area, 2 vertical rectangles with different shapes. Now the colors in it, yeah, I could see like a little orange mixing with the deeper reds. But they're pretty flat colors compared to his larger paintings. His larger paintings, they do the same thing. They throw the patterns. Like I said, he likes to he does think of himself as an expressionist. He jumps away from the realism for the most part. Now, some of his larger paintings, you will have like a female figure, which is more of like a classical Greek pose type thing mixed in with some architectural elements, but he almost jumps to this little shapes where he gets to play with the brush, with the color, where he gets to kind of draw with it and then paint over top, allowing them to go through. And if you can see like the browns here, it sort of looks like a wash, but then it's real thick. And he's allowing some of it to drip So he kind of lets the spontaneity come through on some of these, just let the brush do what it does. He always did use larger brushes. So I imagine he cleans his brushes better than mine. Every 3 months, I got to throw mine out. But yeah, that he definitely has a good structure, and it is like an impact piece. His paintings, like it is meant, they to me, they hold their own by themselves. Like they don't necessarily have to be worked together to justify it. They are sort of a contemporary type thing. I do think he has like especially if you see his larger ones, like this one back here, the yellow and the red flowers, that's getting closer to his larger paintings. And you can see there's a square, like he's kind of composing the canvases. So he's got a big border, square, and a still life, and then he's breaking it with these flowers and with almost like a leaf type thing. And he's kind of letting them fight against each other and play out against each other. He's got the yellows on top of the oranges. He's getting a little more in depth with this one as far as the color schemes, but it's still bold areas that are blocked out. And you'll see that in his larger paintings. But this piece there kind of represents some of his larger stuff, where the collage stuff I've only seen for the last few years. I always saw his larger paintings for the most part. Where now, like, he's doing a lot of these collage pieces where it's multiple drawings on top of each other, some torn stuff pasted into it and reworked again. And he will take like these smaller ones and kind of not necessarily copy. He's not copying it by any means when he does a larger one, but some of the concepts he is pulling from the smaller ones and working on his larger paintings.
Thank you, Dad.
You're welcome.
All right, so now we'll visit our last artist, Joellyn Ross. Hello, Joellyn. Oh, you're muted.
There. Sorry about that.
It's okay. So this is your first exhibition, yes?
Yes. And like the others, I wanted to thank you and Tina, who have been a pleasure to work with. And I've been thrilled at the way my work is exhibited. So thanks to the two of you. Okay. Let me start. The one that you're looking at right now is an exception for me. It's the title of it is Ukraine. I really don't do political art, although I like and admire political art. However, when Russia invaded Ukraine, my sense of fairness and justice was shocked. And I had this instant visual of this huge force slamming or overwhelming this smaller force. And the red is the blood that has been caused. But as I said, that's the exception for my work. But I just had such a strong reaction to what had happened. So, and I had this instant visual. The texture in it, in the black, is I used a textured medium with sand. I guess it has sand in it to create the texture of the black area. But typically, I've been painting now. I've been doing artwork for about 20 years. It's sort of a second career for me. I'm still working about 80% time. I'm a licensed psychologist. I have a private practice in Cherry Hill. I started out doing artwork because my husband and a friend who's a painter gave me a sketchbook and some pencils. And I said, okay, and took a drawing class, was hooked, and have been pursuing it ever since. For me, it's been a challenge to improve my skills and to develop myself as an artist. I'm strongly influenced certainly by color, as you can probably tell, by geometric forms, and also by architecture. I've always been very moved by architecture and architectural forms. So I have started out, there are some changes within this exhibition. Some of the works are more strictly angular. And then about a year or so ago, I decided to put in some more curves and to play with ellipses. So there's texture in some of the work because I tend to paint over other paintings when I don't like them anymore or feel they're not successful. So the white one was actually painted over another painting. And the benefit of that is it creates a certain, you can see a bit of the history of the painting underneath it, which I like. I like that sense of pentimenti, I guess is the right word for that. My process is, it's interesting, it occurred to me in my professional work as a psychologist, people bring problems to me, and my goal and mission is to try to help people to find solutions and structure and organization in their lives. When I start a painting, I typically create a problem for myself, which I then endeavor to solve by coming up with a solution in the shapes and the colors. A lot of times what I will do is take a photograph of what I'm working on and import that photo into an app that allows me to experiment with different colors and shapes and techniques. And then I can go back to the canvas and go back and forth, and that way develop my paintings. I also like having a sense of mystery, which I think this one exemplifies. It's like, where is this going? When you walk in here, where are you going? What's at the end of that path? This next one is so in some ways a hats off to a friend of mine who's a painter who believes that every painting should have some pink. So I went a little crazy and did a lot of pink in this one. But then also wanted that sense of mystery, like, what is that box? Is it looking at you? Or are you looking at it? I don't know. And this too has multiple layers. I went back in and over this several times, so you see a bit of the history in there. Another one definitely inspired by architecture. I particularly love the work of artists like Richard Diebenkorn. I love the exhibition this summer of Sean Scully's work. And I was really inspired, was in Greece several years ago and discovered a Greek artist named Opi Zuni, who was also, her work is very graphic and has beautiful colors and also is inspired by architecture. So when I first saw one of her paintings, I felt like I was looking at a kindred spirit. And I've since gotten some catalogs of her work and have really let her inspire me. The large work sort of in the center here, this is the third iteration of colors for this work. It started out with one palette, went to another, and then I finally ended up with this red and kind of purplish blue and a very, very dark blue. And as a result, there's a lot of texture. In the one to the left, this one, I just liked playing with the colors. So and how they play off each other, the violet and the red and the blue.
So
But also the
Joellyn,
architectural thing.
in your
Yes.
work, there's abstraction, but there's also space. So it's sort of
Yes.
on the straddling both worlds. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think that comes from my love of architecture. And for example, this painting, the one you're focused on now, is actually, for me, an abstract rendering. I have a deck off the second floor of my house that is this very private space and then is open to the sky. So this painting actually was inspired by my sitting out there where no one can see me, but I can see the sky and I can see the great beyond. And so, yeah, I definitely love the sense of space. This painting was absolutely inspired by Opizuni, the Greek artist who does the beautiful graphic work with wonderful colors. She also plays, as I did in this one, with having a very sort of, almost like there's clouds in the background. So it's this combination of this very, very abstract kind of background with the very sharp graphic shapes on top of it. And again, because I've painted over it, there is some texture. This one on the left also is another one that was inspired by my sitting out on my deck. Because again, it's this sense of just looking at the great beyond, but there are walls on either side of the deck. So again, it's this sense of space. And that looking out into the beyond, to the sky. It's very peaceful out there. And then this one, which is a larger version of the one in the hallway. I did the small one first, and then I had a large canvas, so I decided to replicate it in this larger version, which was a challenge. I don't usually paint things this large, but it was a good exercise. And once again, I wanted to incorporate some curves, add something different. I also love red. So it was fun to use the different shades of red. And then also the one, the top right, is another where I was experimenting using ellipses, using curves, enjoying my love of red. And the one underneath it, I was looking at some paintings by Mondrian, who was, I don't know if he's one of the first graphic artists, but his work is very graphic. And I like the different sizes of shapes, experimenting with different color combinations. And this one is another, I've done a series of paintings of corners. I think my own sort of personal explanation for my love of corners is I have felt since 2016 that I was somehow backed into a corner, feeling very discomforted with what was going on in this country. But so I've done a series of paintings of corners, and this is one of them. Also, the first painting of Opizuni's that I saw was of a corner. So it's also my ongoing interest in her work and in being inspired by her work.
Thank you, Joellyn.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone who came. I appreciate it.
So are there any last questions for Joellyn or any of the artists? Okay, well, if not, we'll end here. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Thanks so much to the artists for their work and their talks tonight. The show is up through February 12th. Hope you can see it. And hope you have a great night.
Thank you. Good show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.